Bienvenidos. Welcome to the Careers Without Connections podcast, the podcast for underrepresented professionals who are building their careers from scratch and navigating unfamiliar professional spaces. I'm your host, Jenna Linares. I am a first gen graduate and also a first gen professional. So today we're going to be focused on our guest here today, interviewing Miss Jasmin Lopez. Jasmin is a first generation Latina. She was raised by Salvadorian immigrants. She's a former engineer turned business consultant and content creator. So Jasmin just graduated with her MBA, her Master of Business Administration from Emory University's Goizueta Business School. After graduating, she is going to first start out working as a growth and strategy intern at an ed tech startup in Bogota, Colombia, before she transitions into her full-time consulting role in Chicago, where she's accepted a position at Accenture as a senior strategy consultant. We're today really just going to focus on Jasmin's experience being a first-gen graduate. We're going to go into a little bit about what it's going to be like for her moving to a whole new city, moving from her home state of Georgia, moving far away from her family, starting over in a big city. And we're also, of course, we have to ask her about her transition from engineering to content creation and now business consultant. So welcome, Jasmin. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation and yeah, it'll be fun.
I want to point out that I saw in your story that you just started to get paid sponsorships recently after doing content for a couple of years. And I saw that you were just in Chicago and you got to go to a whole music festival. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm still like in shock right now that all this just happened because I've been posting content since 2023 and I love music festivals since I was like 18. Like that was just like a huge thing for me. And I really wasn't consistent until maybe like the past year and a half. And, I used to always hear those quotes like, being consistent pays off. And I always thought it was like kind of cheesy or like a cliche, but quite literally just being consistent with my content recently has really been paying off. It's been a blessing because I don't know, I feel like music festivals completely changed my life. And so being able to like attend free is just kind of still shocking to me. And I don't know, just kind of like a testament to like the amazing community I've been able to build and just that maybe the content that I'm making is somewhat valuable enough for people to want to pay for it. So yeah, it's just a crazy experience.
No, it's incredibly valuable. I was actually just having a conversation the other day with another first gen Latina. She has her own marketing agency and she's actually going to be a guest on the podcast in a couple of episodes. But she was telling me how in our space there's just kind of not a lot of Latino creators who are doing things that are really value driven informational content. I think that's part of what has helped you build such an engaged community is like the fact that you're being able to give value that is hard to find, especially coming from our community. How was the process like for you? You mentioned consistency is key. How do you stay consistent? I feel like I've had a lot of conversations recently with people who are entrepreneurs or people who are in the creative spaces, and they all say the same thing is like consistency is key. So, how do you stay consistent?
Some weeks are harder than others. Initially, how I started to be consistent is like I am a cheese ball and still believe in New Year's resolutions. I know once again it's another one of those things that people are like, oh, like if you really wanted to start something, why don't you start now? I know. I feel like fresh beginnings are important, at least to me. I remember I think it was 2024 where I was like, okay, like I see the impact and the influence like content can have. So I'm like, let me just try to post once a day. I was like, let me try to post every day. I did okay. Some days, once again, are harder than others, but at least bare minimum, I would have posted at least like 4 times a week. So that's kind of how I started building consistency. But I would say like when I really started to see my content blow up is when I shifted my mindset about it, where like to me, like I genuinely love posting content because I feel like I'm just talking to my internet friends. And I feel like kind of shifting that perspective of like, oh, I need to do this to look a certain way. It's like, what do I want to talk about? What kind of community do I want to attract with what I'm talking about? And so for me, a lot of that has been stuff related to like business, music festivals, current events. And then the fourth pillar is whatever might be going on in my life that I want to talk about it and see like who else might be going through that issue. So I feel like for me now, consistency has I've been able to be more consistent just because I have had a little bit more of like a mindset shift about it.
That makes sense. You've also taken a couple of content classes at school, right?
Yeah, I took this one class called content marketing, and that completely changed my outlook about content as a whole because before that, I was just focused on TikTok because the community on TikTok is just incredible. Like that whole piece about like seeing the follower count. I hate even saying the word followers, feels so icky, but just kind of shifting my mindset about it being internet friends was me hyper fixated just like on the TikTok community because there I feel like I genuinely have like a deeper relationship with my community there, but taking that class just made me realize how much more opportunities there are on other platforms and how different algorithms operate in different ways. Where I felt like I was just very attached to TikTok that I didn't want to focus on others because I felt like I wouldn't be able to provide the same value to my community, slash, trying to rebuild a new community from scratch on another platform is just honestly super intimidating and daunting because I know you could probably relate to this. Like, even starting off is hard. And so starting again. But taking that class just made me realize content at the end of the day is just a huge experiment for all of us. So why not have fun for it? Test out different platforms, like see what communities you can build. And so I think more than anything, it just kind of gave me the confidence to keep exploring my voice in different channels.
I feel like nothing but good can really come from putting yourself in the position of wanting to create content or wanting to like build something from scratch. It, of course, is associated with a lot of unpleasant feelings and emotions because you gotta kinda get over a lot of people call it cringe. I don't love using that word. But at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of content is just super important and transferable skills. And for me, granted, I haven't even been in the content space long. I think I really just started trying to be attempting to be consistent last year. Now I'm starting a podcast from scratch and definitely feeling how challenging it can be to get everything up and running, not just sitting down and scheduling and actually filming it, but then marketing it, finding people that want to be on it, coming up with questions and topics and trying to have structure, especially now that the space is definitely getting more saturated. But I don't feel like that discourages me at all. I try to look at it as well, if this person is doing it and being super successful and like being able to accomplish this, and they seem like a pretty normal person. All I'm really seeing from a lot of successful people in this space is consistency. Of course, there's more to it. I'm not calling them dumb or anything, but Jasmine and I actually we met through TikTok. So
See? See, there's cool
mhm.
people on there.
Yeah, yeah. We definitely have to touch on your transition from engineering because you did your bachelor's in engineering. You were working as an engineer for a little bit, and then now you're doing this transition into business. So, do you want to tell us more about what led to that?
Yeah, so I did my bachelor's in chemical engineering and I worked in the space for a few years. And during that time, ChatGPT came out and it completely rocked my world for two reasons. One, as you get more experience, you start getting on more challenging projects, and my work became a lot more interdisciplinary. And so, me and Chat would be going back and forth with me trying to figure out how electrical engineers work with like civil engineers. Chat literally saved me so much hours on project work because it was able to really explain things to me in a very simple way. And on the flip side, it also really scared me just knowing that this machine could literally do my job 10 times better than me without it having to quite literally sit here. And so it just made me realize that I was in a role that could be automated away. Obviously, chemical engineering is complicated and it will take a couple of years, but it just made me realize that I'll never be able to outskill an AI chat thing like that. But what I can do is maybe try to polish up my people skills because at the end of the day, AI can't show up to a meeting. AI can't build the connections. AI can't pitch an idea. Well, it can, but you have to prompt it and set that objective function. And so I wanted to do business school because I wanted to just become a more well rounded professional because I felt like my engineering classes did a good job of helping me solve problems, but I wanted to better understand like the broader context of how to figure out what problems to solve or like what to focus on because, engineering is powerful and quite literally has changed the world as we experience it. But a lot of the engineering we experience as users is very much determined by like what, just different management teams are telling their engineers to do. And so once again, to me, business school is just like a great opportunity to just broaden my perspective and just my skill set as a whole.
Yeah. So now Jasmine is officially joining only about 8% of Latinos in the entire US that hold a master's degree. On that topic, how are you feeling about that, Jasmine? Now that you've completed your master's degree and you're joining the small but growing percentage of our community earning their masters.
I don't take this lightly. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this, just like many of the people listening here today. Like, even finishing high school, that was one challenge. Finishing undergrad was a different challenge. Finishing master's, that was a challenge. I feel so grateful to have had like parents to support me, friends to, listen to me rant and cry throughout the years. We're graduating in this very uncertain time period. And so I don't know, I feel excited, a little scared about the future, but I think that's okay because that means a new opportunity is coming up. And I'm just grateful to have gone through a program that has instilled in me a sense of confidence that I can figure things out. I don't know how, I don't know in what way, but like, if you can figure out those things, I feel like the world is quite literally your oyster. And that's what I appreciate about school. It kind of just helps you build that level of confidence.
Yeah, and I feel like part of that is just being able to overcome all the different unique and complex barriers that you face as a first gen student. And for someone like you being a first gen Latina in a super male dominated field, and being able to say that, well, if I can overcome this and come out on top and still reach my goal, then, you know, I'm going to be okay. There's the proof in the pudding, essentially. But I'm really curious to hear about what types of barriers you felt like you specifically experienced throughout grad school or undergrad too, if you want to touch on it. Cause I think there's a lot of overlapping commonalities as far as first gen students in terms of a lot of us experience financial pressures. And there's some statistic that says the number of first gen students in comparison to more quote unquote traditional students, like people whose parents went to school and they come from a background of exposure to education, a lot more first gen students in general hold jobs and work more hours than counterpart traditional students. Do you want to talk a little bit more about areas that you overcame, or if there was maybe like one specific thing you remember that you thought at the time it felt like it was the end of the world and you got over it and you're like, oh, okay.
Honestly, for me, the biggest thing has really always been like financial, well, at least early on, because I think a lot can relate to us where our parents expected us to go to school, but they never really saved money for it because they just didn't know or like didn't have the means to. And so, in undergrad, there was lots of times when I was working 2 to 3 jobs at any given point just to be able to support myself throughout college. At first, it wasn't too bad because, you start with your easier classes at the beginning. But as I continued to take more difficult classes, it became harder to juggle, especially when a lot of my other classmates didn't have to work. For me, that was always something I was very envious of my classmates. Like, I just can't tell you the amount of students that had never even worked up until undergrad. And for me, I had been working since I was like 15. But in undergrad, I eventually got a scholarship from the Taco Bell Foundation, $25,000 that completely changed my life. I was able to quit my jobs, fully focus on school, and my GPA improved. I was able to undertake all these leadership roles. I felt like that scholarship also instilled in me a sense of confidence where like, oh shoot, like what I'm doing, it might be hard, but it's going to be worth it eventually. Just having faced all those financial pressures in undergrad, I was a lot more strategic with grad school. I know in undergrad, I didn't think to apply to scholarships. I didn't have those mentors to do it. My school wasn't one of the best schools. So once I like was in undergrad and met people that did have scholarships was kind of where I learned that this is something people do and actually can get scholarships. So with my master's program, I was a lot more strategic with that. Unfortunately, I did still take on quite a bit of student loans, but not as much as I would have if I hadn't applied to stuff.
That's so interesting though, because I feel like I've heard you mention that you got scholarships. I didn't realize it was the Taco Bell Foundation, though. What was the application process like for you? How did you even realize that was something that you could do to apply for that scholarship?
I did an internship in DC. I worked for CHCI, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Working for them, that also really changed my life because I met so many Hispanics, professional Hispanics that were just doing incredible things. And at that point, I really didn't know too many people of color, like doing engineering, working in policy. It's pretty black and white in Atlanta, but getting that exposure in DC, I met someone that did the Taco Bell scholarship. I just heard it through word of mouth. I looked into it. You had to do a video submission about like what your program is, why you're studying that, and like things along that matter. And so, yeah, I made a video and yeah, I won first place for that year. And yeah, like I said, it just changed my life.
I remember when I was going through school, when I would come across information that it seemed like it should be common sense or common knowledge, but it's not. I remember the topic of scholarships was never once brought up in my household. It was always work hard and like save money so that you can pay for school and then go to school so that you can and then graduate and make more money. I think that whole experience of yours, being able to have exposure and have conversations with people that looked like you and came from similar places as you, and they probably were in a similar position as you, and then maybe they were introduced to that same scholarship from someone else, you know? So I think it's interesting how just like the right conversation can completely steer the direction of your undergraduate and overall college journey.
Yeah, that's so true.
Is there any specific advice that you would give to other first gen students that are thinking about applying to grad school, or maybe they are just looking for scholarships and looking for funding too? Like, what's your biggest piece of advice for other first gen students?
I would say know your why and then like do your research. So know your why. I mean, graduate programs, they are incredible, but they are not easy. And the difference between grad school and undergrad, it's like you're much older. And I think the opportunity cost gets a lot higher in the sense that, like, you could do a master's, but, like, do you need it? I think there's a lot of rhetoric online about just the value of education programs. I think they are still valuable, but I think it really just depends on, once again, your why. I know for me, I get clowned on a lot because of how expensive my program was, but being first gen, the connections I made and, like, the experiences I had, I would not have had access to that in any other way if I didn't go to grad school. But I think maybe a counterpart that maybe grew up in a more affluent neighborhood and maybe has more affluent connections inherently, maybe they don't need to invest in such an expensive program and maybe do something else. I don't know. I think once again, it just depends on your career goals. And then doing your research, I think there's a lot of ways to get certified, get education. I think it's just important to recognize like what best fits your why. And so, if you're just interested in maybe getting a promotion at work, maybe a full-time MBA doesn't make sense. Maybe a evening MBA, or maybe you want to become more technical. Maybe an MBA doesn't make sense. Maybe like a master's in data science or yada yada. So I think it's just important to recognize that everyone has a different journey and, do what makes the most sense for your journey.
I definitely agree with that. I actually went into my master's program so incredibly blind, which is kind of crazy because I was able to graduate 100% debt free and I basically got paid to go to school. But when I started my Master of Public Administration, I did not even really understand what public administration meant. I didn't fully understand my earning potential, the types of roles that I was going to have. I was really learning. I remember I'd like be in class and we'd be talking about something that it seemed like everyone else knew what the professor was referring to, and I'd be like googling it on my phone hoping that no one would look on my screen. But I knew I wanted to go to grad school because I wanted to increase my earning potential, and I went straight out from undergrad. So I was like, I just want to go and be done with it. And I also did my undergrad during COVID. Started at community college. Most of my actual university of experience was completely remote. So for me, grad school was like the dorm experience that I never got. But fortunately, I was able to hustle and graduate without debt. And so then, of course, it's worth it. Who would say no to a debt free master's? But I feel like I didn't have people around me to tell me, consider these things. And I also didn't even know to ask the questions. I remember I didn't even know the difference between undergrad, grad, and like doctorate for the longest time. It was
Mhm.
also foreign to me.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I guess what was your high school experience like? Because I will say, I feel like high school definitely will shape how much you understand about like higher education.
High school was not good to me. I basically didn't go my senior year.
Okay.
And no, I just like didn't show up. My mom was like, please go to school. I'll pay you. And I was like, no, I don't want to go. I was just skipping school a lot. I was just hanging out with the wrong crowd. And I'd had a lot of family things happen. Beginning of junior year was the year that my dad's accident happened at work, which led to the amputation of his hand. And then shortly after, a family member of mine died from brain cancer. So there was like a lot going on. And I feel like I didn't really talk about it and kind of just made excuses for myself by finding like distractions. And one, I didn't really talk about it. I kind of kept it a secret. Two, I feel like the school that I went to was so culturally unaware. There was so much nepotism in my town in general because it was a small town. And so a lot of the kids around me, it's like, oh, well, I know your mom and dad and they own this business and I'm friends with them and their name's on this building and things like that. And so I feel like I didn't have teachers or mentors or advisors around me telling me like, "Hey, you need to stop doing what you're doing and get back on track because you have so much potential to be doing well academically." I feel like I didn't even really start to truly get on it and see what types of potential I had when I kind of just put my head down and focused until grad school. And that really just became, I should say, came from a place of necessity because I did not want to go into a lot of debt. I didn't get involved in clubs or anything like that because I started working at a young age. And I also just didn't have friends. I remember growing up in my hometown, just like the older I got every single year, my social circle just got smaller and smaller. And that was fine. And it was ultimately for the best because I had been outgrowing my environment for a long time, but I was just like, well, I don't have any friends. I'm having unpleasant experiences with people around me. I remember now that I'm mentioning all of this, the one group of friends that I had like this really big dramatic falling out with. Like one of the girls took a group picture of us and like cut my head out of it and like posted it on Snapchat.
Oh,
Um, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I just had really no incentive to wanna be around those people living in a smaller town, going to a smaller high school. I definitely always had my parents being like, "You need to go to school, like, you have potential, we see this potential in you," but I've always been very stubborn, and so I actually initially wanted to take time off because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And the only type of advice and guidance my parents could offer me was, you need to go to school. But I was like, okay, well, how? Where's the money going to come from? What should I study? What are my options? Who should I talk to? What kind of questions should I be asking? And all of that I was able to figure out on my own, but I turned out okay.
Yeah.
Master's 6 years after high school, completely debt free. So
Hell yeah.
yeah, but I don't know, do you think that after hearing all of that, does that kinda make sense to you why I would be so unaware going into college? Did you have a different high school experience? Like, were you involved in clubs? Did you have mentorship or guidance or anyone around you kind of telling you about your options?
Mine is similar, but in a different way. Like the awareness wasn't there, but not because it was a small town. More so, I just went to like a bad school. I ended up doing a STEM night once I graduated and stuff. And so I kind of am familiar with the statistics. It's like 97% minority, I think 70% were Hispanic and black, and then the other percentage just different colors. And so just very underfunded, not the best place to go. We do have Migos that graduate from my high school. So that gives perspective. It's just like, I don't want to
I
say it's
didn't
like
know that.
school because it was in the suburbs, but they would call us Brokemar. So it just wasn't in a very affluent neighborhood, which was okay. I feel like I had a good high school experience. Like I was very social. I wasn't a good student by any means. And I really didn't know about the different career opportunities out there because my parents are like blue collar and my school just didn't really talk about that. Like we had a lot of military recruiters, but not once that I remember did we have like a college fair. And I ended up transferring one of the years to a more affluent school that my cousin was districted to. And I remember in my language arts class, they were talking about college applications. They're $150, like, start preparing for that. And I was like, you have to pay to apply to college? Like, even that itself, I wasn't aware of until like my junior year because my original school, they just didn't talk about things like that. And so I think at the end of the day, what really I think is important is people don't realize you don't know what you don't know. And we're very lucky to be in an era where you can just easily Google things. But most kids that go to maybe our schools from our backgrounds, they don't know to Google scholarships for school, unless they have someone telling them, look up scholarships. So I think that is kind of like the power of social media now, where like people like you and I, we can take a mic, take our phones and be like, hey, like I went through this, like don't do this or do this and stuff. And so I don't know, I feel we're very lucky to be in this generation, and I'm excited for our future children because they'll have that level of exposure. But I will say, I think high school experiences, I think people underestimate how powerful they are. More than anything, how powerful where the zip code you grow up in is, because it can quite literally change your trajectory or completely hold you back. It just kind of depends on you if you have the resilience or like the drive to want to maybe leave that zip code or whatever. Sorry, that's like a whole other conversation about public policy and stuff like that. But all this to say, I think your story is incredible, dude. I'm like really excited to just have met you and stuff like that.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a blessing to get to know you and to have what little time with you I've been able to get to have before you get ready to hop to Colombia and then hop to Chicago. But I would love to come visit you in Chicago. I have never been. It's my plan to go check it out regardless, and I'll definitely hit you up whenever I make it over there.
You have a free place to stay, so hit me up.
Okay. On the topic of you moving, I feel like another thing about coming from our type of background, especially culturally, Latinos, we like to stay close to home. Feel like if it were up to my dad, I would still be at home right now. And yeah, I remember when I first left after I graduated with my master's, I decided I wanted to pack up my car and move across the country and like start my career in the Northeast. And I had been able to land on my feet and find a job. And I was able to get an internship with Philadelphia City Council, have that turn into a full-time policy analyst role. And I remember texting my dad and being like, "Yeah, I'm getting moved to full-time policy analyst." And he was like, "Okay, well, whenever you want to come home." But all that to say, a lot of people, especially other first-gen Latinos, ask me about what's my experience leaving home and being so far from home. And me, I was always, for the longest time, in Oregon, moved a little bit further out from my hometown to go to school, but it was like a 45-minute drive, which was nothing. So I was in kind of like this 20-mile radius growing up my whole life. And then moved completely across the country to the Northeast. Now I'm down in the South. And that's not very common in our community. So, how are you feeling going to Chicago? At least you have, like, this super exciting role, though, and you did your internship there too. So you have a feel for the city, but what are your thoughts on your move?
It's bittersweet. I love Atlanta. Well, I don't know if you've noticed at this point, most people stay Atlanta, but we're all 30 to 40 minutes out. And so I love the metro Atlanta area a lot. And so this decision wasn't easy, but I just feel like at this point in my career, I'm kind of ready for like a challenge. I'm lucky that the city I'm going to does have a few friends already there. Cause I know for me, I need at least a pal or two to give me just a sense of community and just kind of help me throughout that process. Throughout undergrad, I did move at different points. Like I lived in DC for a little bit. I lived in South Carolina as well. And I'd always get homesick. But when I was in Chicago this past summer, I did feel certain waves of homesickness, but I also felt like this really, I don't know, this strong sense of excitement. Like I felt like I was just constantly being challenged in ways that I wasn't in Atlanta. Not saying Atlanta doesn't challenge me, but I felt like it had just been a while since I had been to such a unique city with so many young professionals doing so many cool different things at a much larger scale. And so that's kind of what motivated me to choose Chicago post grad. Just I've been in Atlanta my whole life, so I kind of just want to see what other opportunities are out there. And I am not going to be surprised if in the next like 3 to 5 years I end up coming back to Atlanta just because we have great weather, great people. But I think with me having a master's, I'm like maybe it's time to just challenge myself in a new way and eventually come back home.
I don't predict anything besides growth for you in this next period of your life. And take it from me as someone who has moved to different parts of the countries in several years and moved not nearly as prepared as you did without community, without work. It may be painful and unpleasant sometimes, but it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And like ultimately, it's going to be good for you and you can always come back. You know what I mean? Like it's just an experience. You're not rooted anywhere ever because you've already taken the steps to get your master's, be educated. You have the drive, you have the initiative, you clearly have the intelligence. You can take that anywhere in the world. So, very excited for you. I guess the last thing that I kind of want to touch on is the fact that not only are you moving to a big city, but you are going to be in a predominantly male space, which, you're accustomed to that coming from a chemical engineering background and in the business world. But how are you like being able to find your confidence and make space for yourself, especially Atlanta's a big city, but this is where you're from. You know the territory. Now you're going to a new place, unexplored, uncharted. So how are you like finding that confidence?
Yeah, I mean, geez, I'm still working on this to this day. But when I, started my career in engineering, being in male dominated spaces was very, very uncomfortable initially because in undergrad, you'd be surprised. It's actually a pretty good ratio. But once you step into the field, is really where you see how much of a disparity there was in previous generations. And so I'd always be the type to kind of hide in a corner and not want to draw any attention to myself. But I feel like business school has really highlighted to me just how diverse the workplace can be and how important it is to really just be proud of like where you come from, especially because like in the business sphere, and I think in any industry, diverse perspectives are important. They make things interesting. They make good products, most importantly. One of my favorite podcasters, her name is Cody Sanchez, also Latina, did like private equity, all these incredible things. And she's really just changed my perspective on the whole matter where it's like, you're different. Cool, lucky you, like you're stepping into corporate spaces where there's probably more Johns than females in the office. Like leverage the fact that people are going to remember you in a meeting. And if you're in that meeting, it's because people want to hear your opinion. So take advantage of the fact that you're different. And, hearing her just say that in different podcasts was really helpful to me as I've been transitioning in business. Like I remember my MBA internship this past summer, I was unmuting in calls and talking to senior level people, which, might not sound like a big deal to some people, but I would have never done that as an engineer because I was always like, oh, I don't want people to notice me. But like even small things like that, I've been able to get better at. And I think her just kind of reminding us that it's okay to be different. It's a superpower. My other favorite piece of advice that she says is like, find your allies. Like, there's a lot of cool guys out there that want you to succeed, especially like, the whole theory of the girl dads or like girl dad managers. Like, people like that, they're not there to make you look bad because at the end of the day, you make them look bad if you look bad. And so it's important to just look for community in these very monolithic spaces because you'd be surprised who's out there ready to like lend a supporting hand.
I work with a couple of girl dads right now,
Yes,
and I
yes.
definitely yeah, I get the theory. I really love what you shared about that perspective, and also a fan of Cody Sanchez. She is a huge trailblazer, not just for Latinas, for women in general. I think the way that she framed it and you were able to kind of also frame even right now is making me think about it in a different way because it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the mindset and the perspective. I feel like a lot of the discourse around being a minority is typically associated with this is all the ways that disadvantages me, disadvantages me. Is that true statistically? Absolutely. Is that true as well, just based on the things that you are experiencing in a social matter? Yeah. But also, it doesn't have to be just hyperfixating on this is every single way that this is not going to work for me or going to be a disadvantage. And I think just even being able to flip it around is going to make it that much more, not just powerful, but also in a way is going to almost diminish all the negatives. But to close us out, Jasmine, Is there anything that you're currently working on that you're excited about? And how can people support you or stay connected with you?
So, with me recently graduating, I interviewed my professors to just share a little bit of like the insight and wisdom that they've imposed on me to people that have been following me during my journey, slash, to just give more perspective on how academia is responding to all these AI shifts. And so, I'm currently releasing episodes on YouTube under BizTina. So if you want to just understand more about how professors are looking at this AI shift, highly encourage you to check it out. If not, I'm always posting on TikTok and Instagram. So yeah, at BizTina.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everyone who listened, and especially if you listened all the way through. And again, if you want to hear more content like this, watch more stuff like this, of course, like, subscribe, and my inboxes are always open. Thank you.